Everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. It is our top 10 of 2024 episode. Yes, after our break and then come back for our Nosferatu, we are now here with the top 10, and it couldn't come at a better time because January actually is going to have some horror movies for us to cover in the theater and on VOD, so it's good to get this episode squared away. So I will introduce my co-host, starting with Mr. Venom. How's it going?
Greetings and salutations, list lovers. Yeah, I'm out here in Southern California trying to avoid a wildfire that's pretty much taken out a crap ton of houses. I was reading the list earlier of the celebrities that have lost houses in this fire. And they include John Goodman, Eugene Levy, Anthony Hopkins, and Teller from Penn and Teller. There's other names on it too, but yeah, and we're talking about mansions. We're talking about like big multi-million dollar houses. So, yeah, pretty sad out here. But for whatever it's worth, I'm in the valley. I'm a little bit away from the fire right now, and it seems like the worst of it is past us. So, knock on wood. The fire avoids my little town of Sherman Oaks, and yeah, everything should be back to normal within a couple of days. Let's hope.
Yeah, I felt it would be a little remiss not to at least ask you since you're in the region, but since you already kind of walked us through what's going on, I guess I can leave it at that. But just, here's hoping that you're able to stay safe. And it's unfortunate, the damage and all the lost homes for those that it's already happened to, and let's hope that anything further is minimized. Also with us as always, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here. I am thankfully unaffected as of now. I can see the smokestacks in the distance, but that is basically all I see. The air quality can be felt because of all of the ashes and embers, but thankfully, the only other instance is that one of my friends at work is in danger of losing everything because he came in yesterday saying that he was potentially going to be under an evacuation notice by the end of the day yesterday, and he never showed up for work today. So I'm pretty sure that he is under an evacuation. So Jorge, good luck out there. I hope we hear from you soon, but that is as close as we get because he is the farthest one out at the place I work at. So that is, as of right now, I can say the only instance of my involvement with this. Just, a teammate at work who could potentially be under an evacuation, but other than that, just seeing the smoke in the smoke in the air in the distance. That's basically all I've got. So, yeah, stay safe out there. Everybody, hopeful for the best, and let's get this shit under wraps and out of the way because I've got movies to watch and I don't want to watch the news all day. So,
yeah. All right. This is our top 10 of 2024 show. I imagine that the majority, or at least a lot of these, have been covered extensively on the show. So we will do like a little spiel when we go through our list, but we're not going to do in-depth reviews or anything. That way we can just move through our list because the show by default always takes longer than standard episodes. So I don't know. I guess before each person's 10, since we're about to get right into it, if you want to give like a little spiel on the year that was to kind of intro your list, that's fine. So we can get right into it now. Venom, tell me about 2024 and give me your number 10.
Well, as regular listeners of this show would know, 2024 started with a just terrible run of movies. For the first 3 months of the year, it wasn't until the end of March For the first 3 months of the year, about the only movie that we gave a positive review to was Lisa Frankenstein, as that was a January release last year. And sadly, it was my number one movie for a large part of the year, probably until at least April or May, maybe even June. So the year definitely started out slow, but it definitely picked up. Once April hit and once we started getting that barrage of theatrical horror, and then, going into the summer and then going into October, which admittedly October this year, I felt like we didn't really get as much Halloween horror as we usually get in October. But we still got a couple of cool things. We still got Mr. Crockett and Carved and a few other little Halloween titles. Like, not that Mr. Crockett was a Halloween title, but it did get released in October, so I'm going to throw it in there. But anyway, interesting year. Very, very weak start with a very, very strong finish, I got to say. But I mean, with the final movie of 2025 that got released on Christmas Day, the year ended with a bang, I gotta say. So here's hoping 2025 starts out better than last year. I can't imagine it could possibly start out worse. I have already seen a theatrical horror movie in theaters for 2025. That was, of course, The Damned, the only horror film to open in theaters in the first week of January, and it was actually a halfway decent little movie. I kind of felt the same way about it that I felt about last year's Out of Darkness, if you guys remember that one with the the cave people, Neanderthals, and Homo erectus and blah blah blah. This one isn't set in the same period by any stretch, but it is still a period piece, and it just kind of gave me the same vibes as that movie. So the long and the short of it is, 2024 started out crappy, but I'm very happy with where we ended up going. In my opinion, I think 2024 was better than 23, even though 24 started so slow. I think as I look at my top 10 from this year and last year, I feel like this year is a little bit stronger. Another thing that is a first for me this year, all 10 of my movies on my top 10 this year are going to be Fresh Cuts movies. Go figure. That has never happened in the 8 years I've been podcasting and the 6 or so years that we've been doing this show and the previous show that had a different title. I have never had all 10 of the movies be movies that we reviewed on our show. So like Mike said, I won't have to go into too many crazy spiels about the movies, but I do have in front of me a list of 15, my favorite 15 movies of the year. Of course, numbers 15 through 11 will be my honorable mentions, which we'll talk about later. And my top 10, well, let's get it off now, folks. My number 10 of the year, I got a feeling this is going to be a movie that's not going to appear on a lot of people's top 10s. When we reviewed this on the show, I remember I was the highest of the three of us. This is a film that was released on Netflix this past May, and it is a movie with no dialogue. And no, it is not Azrael, as some of you are probably thinking, as we did get a non-dialogue theatrical release this year. But no, my friends, I am talking about Monster from Indonesia. This movie, like I said, it dropped in May of this year on Netflix. And like I said, this movie is dialogue free. There is some spoken words in it, but when they say there's no dialogue, what they mean is no one is speaking to each other. Like, there'll be people calling out for help and things like that, but there's no actual dialogue, like, two people having a conversation. So it's still a fairly dialogue-free movie. It's practically speechless. And of course, it is the story of Alana and Rabin, two Indonesian friends who are kidnapped by a human monster. And then the movie just kind of highlights their escape. Are they able to escape? What they do to try to escape, things like that. We learn more and more about the antagonist, which actually turns into more than one antagonist at the pretty much at the halfway point of the movie. We get an antagonist change, which I actually really, really like. Now, the reason I say I don't think a lot of people are going to have this on this list, on their top 10 list, is because it's a very slow burn. Nothing supernatural about it. It's just, basically someone, a group of people who are kidnapping kids for the organ trade. We see some scenes of someone coming and dropping off a cooler and picking up an envelope of money, and then later on they pick up the cooler that is now filled with the body of a young boy. Just really, really cool things like that. And like I said, this just worked for me. So we already reviewed it, so longtime listeners, if you've been listening all year, you already know our thoughts on it. But obviously, with my rewatches, this actually did jump into my top 10. This was not in my top 10 when I started my rewatches, but after rewatching my top 18 films of the year, plus a couple of others that I was turned on to late in the year, this has dropped into my number 10 slot. That is Monster, coming to us from Indonesia.
All right. Yes, I remember that one. That's actually, you mentioned maybe not on the list. Well, I'll say.
Oh, am I going to be disappointed? That's awesome. No, I'm glad.
No, actually, you're accurate for me. It's on one of my honorable mentions.
Okay, honorable mentions acceptable.
It was close though.
We still don't know about Don. I mean, Don. Like I said, I do remember Don not being ultra high on it, but who knows? Maybe on rewatch he had a change of heart. So yeah, the Monster, my number 10.
All right, Don, let's get your 10, and if you have any spiel for 2024, go ahead.
Yeah, not on my list. I'll start off with that one, but for longtime listeners of this, you will know that I do a different set of top 10s. I pass out top 10s in various categories, from slasher to creature feature to zombie to horror comedy and various others. So instead, I used this occasion to count down my top 10 favorite shows that are exclusive to Fresh Cuts. So I will state right here and right now, for those that are new, my list is only taking films that were eligible from coverage on Fresh Cuts. So I will miss a few. The statement that we only covered, statement that Venom's films are only Fresh Cuts, is a little surprising. But my list will, the pool of eligibility is only the 50 films or so that we covered on Fresh Cuts. So that is where I stand. Outside of that, as for the year as a whole, I completely agree with the sentiment Venom expressed. The start of the year was such utter dog shit. Me and Venom jokingly suggested that we start a secondary show and stop covering theatrical releases to finally cover good films for once. So I'm kind of glad that never came to fruition. So, good on 2024 for bringing in some goodies throughout the year, especially in the final stages. I will say that I did enjoy a lot more films than I thought I would. Looking back over the last few years, I can't say that it's as good as 2020 or 2021, which I thought were a little bit stronger. But it was a hell of a lot stronger than 2023, which I really wasn't a huge fan of and didn't really find a whole lot that. Well, I mean, there's a few good hidden gems here and there, but by and large, I think 2023 has been the weakest out of the decade so far. 2024 is just a notch above, slotted in between 2021 and 2023. So, I'm really kind of glad that it picked up, because it was kind of depressing the first few months, trying to get something good to come out of it. So, we'll get started with my number 10. And just again, FYI, the eligibility pool is only Fresh Cuts films. So I will miss a few obvious contenders that were not on here. But my number 10 is Eczema. I really enjoyed it. A fantastic first hour to this. Probably should have been the film as a whole. Dropped down a few slots because the second act really kind of dragged itself off and really felt like it was two films merged together into one. But either way, there's still a lot of great imagery here. Koreans are just absolutely fantastic technically wise. So it looks gorgeous. Everything just has that, Hollywood sheen that you really wouldn't expect in a film like this. But yeah, it worked really well for the most part. I do enjoy both halves, but it still kind of sticks out that it is, two storylines merged into one just to keep the plot line moving. But yeah, overall, it was a fun time. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, there's a quite a bit here that works for me. So number 10 is eczema.
All right, cool. So for me, yeah, 2020, I was about to say 14. 2000, I wish. 2024. Uh, I'm pretty much echoing what's already been said. Started out like not just weak, but like almost abysmal at a certain point because like I felt like there was a little stretch where like some of the movies sounded promising on paper, and then like when we would watch them, it's just like, oh my god, another disappointment. And then things kind of turned around, and then it started getting like really good with a couple good streaks in there. Overall, looking at like a list of like everything we've done for Fresh Cuts and other movies I've watched, I would say overall it's a stronger year, but to be honest, the flip side of that is like I think my top two from last year would still be my top two this year. Like that's how much I liked When Evil Lurks and Godzilla Minus One. Like if they had come out this year, they would probably be my one and two even of this year. But other than that, by the end of this year, I thought it was a strong good year. Like I was a little worried at one point, like, man, am I gonna have like 10 movies that I really feel that are list worthy? And that kind of went away at a certain point. Especially once I actually went back and looked over the list, because sometimes you can have a tendency to, especially for us because we're watching so many every week just for fresh cuts alone, that sometimes once you get months past certain movies, you almost like forget how much you liked them, and then you just kind of see them on a list and you're like, oh yeah, that was really good. But other than that, yeah, that's 2024 kind of generally in a nutshell. But I will go to my number 10, which I am going to be a twinsy with Dawn. I have the same movie at number 10, and like looking back on it, I felt like this movie had the potential to be higher on the list, except it was just a little long, a little unnecessarily long. I think there was a certain point in the movie where it was kind of like repeating some of the things that I felt like they could have just moved on from to the next stage of the movie. But overall, very strong. I like the story. I like the impact. I love the character arcs, and it was one I was looking forward to because I want to say this is one that it was either released like early in the year, but I wasn't able to watch it until like it hit VOD, or there was something going on because I had remember hearing about it a long time before I had actually seen it. Maybe it was an international release that just didn't get the American release for a while. I'm sure I had more to say on that front on the actual Fresh Cuts episode, but yeah, Eczema. Number 10, solid movie, really good, very happy with it. And yeah, I'll leave it at that since it was also Dawn's 10. So back to you, Venom.
All right, I'll have more to say about Exuma in a little bit, so hold on for that. My number 9, this pick, oh man, this is one that I can't believe actually made my top 10. This is a big budget, big studio sequel that when I saw it, I enjoyed it. When I rewatched it, right after we reviewed it, I liked it a little bit more. And then when I watched it this week, I liked it a little bit more. So after watching it 3 or 4 times now, the fact that despite having one of the worst line deliveries at the end of the movie of the year, which did bring the score for this movie down a little bit in the writing and story category, but it still squeaked into my top 10 at number 9. This is Alien Romulus. Yes, I can hear the groans already, but my friends, I love the Alien franchise. I am an apologist for this franchise. I even like the bad ones. I don't care what anyone says. I'll watch Resurrection and Alien 3 all day long. I don't care. I mean, I still know that they're not ultimately great movies, especially compared to the first two in the franchise, but seeing this one directed by Fede Alvarez, who is someone that I greatly enjoy. Like I said, my number one movie of 2013 was his Evil Dead remake. So, I mean, that says a little bit about his pedigree as far as I'm concerned. But he gave us a movie that was a fun time. It was exactly what we expected, but what he did that I didn't expect was the treatment that he gave to the face huggers. As I said on our original review, the face huggers steal this movie. The xenomorphs are almost non-existent. Like, yes, there's xenomorphs in here, but it seems like the bulk of the horror in this movie is around the face hugger and then the pred alien at the end, the human alien, which that might be a spoiler. But if you haven't seen Alien Romulus by now, what are you doing? So, yeah, my number 9, Alien Romulus. I will unapologetically say that I had really, literally enjoyed this movie. And I didn't want it to be in my top 10 for whatever reason. But after watching it this week and rewatching, as I already said, my top 18 of the year, I couldn't keep it off the top 10. So yeah, there it is. I'll leave it at that. You can send all your hate mail to mrvenompodcast@gmail.com, but I don't care. My number 9, Alien Romulus.
Didn't hate it, but not list worthy for me.
All right. Well, let's find out what's list worthy for you at number 9, Don.
All right. Well, list worthy for me is strangely enough, another franchise sequel that I'm pretty sure is probably going to get me hate mail. My number 9 is Terrifier 3. Again, another movie that probably could have been better if it would have just decided to cut itself down and trim up a bit of the fat here and there. But yeah, overall, I still really enjoyed it. Art the Clown is still maniacally fun as always. Kills are just fantastic, over the top and brutal in the best way possible. Still not entirely sold on the Art the Clown worship, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, miles better than part 2. Definitely enjoyed this one a lot more, and looking forward to 4. So yeah, a lot of fun with this one, more than I expected it to. So number 9 is Terrifier 3.
All right, Terrifier 3, Art the Clown getting some love. Okay. All right, so my number 9, one of the rare movies that we do for Fresh Cuts that I had no idea anything about it going in. I kind of just watched it on a whim because, oh, hey, it dropped on a streaming service and it's a new movie of this year. It's an international movie. It's French, and it supposedly does the all shot in one long tracking shot gimmick. Whether or not it actually was, I really don't care, because that didn't determine like my enjoyability out of it. But I thought it was a very interesting way to film the movie. I'll just say what it is now. It's Mads. And I believe it was on Shudder that I watched it, and I really appreciated the movie that kind of took the POV of making the virus or whatever it was that was spreading around the main character, because when the movie opens and you're kind of introduced to who you think might be the main character, and then something happens, like I won't try to spoil every step of the way, but then you kind of see, okay, this is going to follow around like how this thing spreads. And that kind of gave it a frantic, unsettling, uncomfortable pacing and feeling to it, because it kind of gave you that feeling that anything can happen to any character at any time. And that's not something you get out of most movies. Now, that said, you don't want it to be in every movie you watch, but I felt in this specific movie it was done really well. And by the end of it, I was like, yeah, that was not only good, it was like a kind of a unique experience compared to a lot of other things I watched. And look, like I wasn't sure at the time if it would be list worthy, but looking back, I was like, no, I actually did enjoy it that much. So it found a spot on my list at number 9. So that is Mads. So back to you, Venom.
I enjoyed the first half of Mads when it was a little bit more of a mystery of what was actually going on. Once we get to the second half and we find out like what's actually happening, I almost lost interest a little bit. Not to say that the movie takes a negative turn at that point, not at all, but sometimes it's the mystery that keeps my interest. We had that movie Watchers earlier this year, which was mildly interesting until we get the reveal of what those creatures in the woods actually are, and then the movie just became ridiculous at that point. Mads doesn't quite get that bad. Like Mads literally just missed out on my top like 18 or so. I did enjoy it. I love that it's a quick watch, under 90 minutes. It gets right to, I mean, there's like no waiting at all. It gets right to it. So yeah, overall, I did enjoy it. I like the kind of grindhouse look that it had to it. And I will say that the filmmaking is pretty damn well done, because I didn't even notice that it was meant to be a long tracking shot until I saw it a second time. And then I'm like, oh, same thing with the opening scene of Nosferatu. For those who have seen it in theaters, that opening scene is one long shot. I didn't notice until the third time I watched the movie, because you're so fixated on what's going on the screen and the audio, the sound design and everything, that I just didn't notice that it was one long shot. But yeah.
Yeah. It was the same with me. I don't think I noticed it the first time. I was kind of just focused on like, because like I said, the opening character, we do spend a bit of time with him before it like starts hopping around, and then you get like kind of like that French poppy soundtrack. So like any time like with international foreign movies, when they put that local flavor on it, sometimes you're like your mind is connected to those elements of the movie. So yeah, it was. I think it was my second watch where I realized, and maybe I read up on it after seeing it the first time, but once you know it going in, then you're kind of like looking for that. Then it's like, okay, yeah, I see what they're doing.
Exactly, yeah. I did like how Mads had it almost felt like they had a different protagonist per act. For the first act, you're following the guy. For the second act, you're following a different person. And then for the third act, you're following the female, his sister, I think, or girlfriend. Yeah, ex-girlfriend, yeah. So I did like how they did that. I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, Mads is a great film. I'm not going to take anything away from it. To say that it didn't make my top 10 is not an insult to the film. It's a solid one. It's one that I think people need to watch. So yeah, definitely check it out if you've got access to Shudder. Anyway, back to my list. Okay. This will be quick. My number 8 has already been discussed by both Don and Mike. That is Exuma. Yes, number 8, Exuma. I'm going to mildly disagree with both Mike and Don. I didn't really have much of a problem with the length. Yes, it is a 2-hour and 15-minute long movie. But the fact that they split it up into almost two different styles of movies, like the first half of the movie is like a classic Korean ghost story, or Asian ghost story. I shouldn't say Korean specifically, but like just a solid Asian ghost story, with a good mystery. And then the second half of the movie, after the mystery has kind of been revealed, it almost turns more into like a Western style action horror movie where you've got more action set pieces, plus all the gore and the great kills are in the second half of the movie once the Japanese ghost appears. So I actually liked it because of that. It did fall on my list. Like I actually had it at like number 4 for a little while. But yeah, it has fallen down to number 8. But again, obviously it could be said that all 10 of these movies on all of our lists are all movies that we thoroughly enjoyed. So yeah, Exuma, maybe the runtime is going to be a little daunting for some people. I'm not the kind of person who's, especially when it comes to Asian horror. Like if I see an Asian horror movie that's 2+ hours, I have no problem watching it. Now, if it's an American slasher that's over 2 hours, then I'm a little bit, kind of skittish about it. Even though Terrifier 2 and 3 were both over 2 hours and I enjoyed both of them thoroughly, I don't think a slasher needs to be 2 hours, but when it comes to an Asian ghost story, I'm all in. You can make it 3 hours. I'll fucking enjoy it. So yeah, my number 8, Eczema. And that's it for me.
All right, so Eczema, the first official movie to make it to all 3 lists. Cool. Don, what is your number 8?
All right. Well, funny, Mike Venom mentioned a slasher movie because that's my number 8. My number 8 is In a Violent Nature. I can say that the film has a better idea than it really deserves. It's a tactic that we don't really see much of for very good reason, because it's not one that really lends itself out to being toyed with constantly. There's a few instances where it definitely feels more like a gimmick than anything, but yeah, overall, it's still a generally fun time. I wish we would get more on the killer. I wish we would learn a little bit more about him. Just one little instance of a backstory is basically all we get, and I'm not really that fond of it. But other than that, I enjoyed this one a bit more than I really should have. Again, it's a film where it's relying on a gimmick, and as you just heard previously, I'm not a huge fan of that. But otherwise, yeah, there's a fun little killer here. I enjoy some of the sequences when it becomes a slasher film and it's not following the guy around just doing cardio. It's really enjoyable. Kills are fantastic. Again, kill of the year, possibly, maybe a little bit better than the highlight one in Terrifier 3, just because it rips off pieces. But again, really fun time here. Try not to use the gimmick as often. It's going to become kind of aggravating. But for the most part, I enjoy it. And, I guess I'll give it points for creativity, which probably would matter more to other people that like that kind of thing more than me. But anyway, it's still a solid enough time. And again, because we're doing films that are exclusive to Fresh Cuts, made my list at number 8. So I'm going with In a Violent Nature.
Yeah, not on my
Nice.
list, but I definitely agree with kill of the year. Like, for me, it's not even an argument. It is the yoga kill in Violent Nature is 100% my kill of the year. Don mentioned the feature kill in Terrifier. Even if that wasn't a ripoff, it doesn't beat what we saw in Violent Nature. That yoga kill. I mean, I literally stood up in the theater. I don't remember the last time I stood up in a theater and said, holy shit, out loud. And I wasn't the only one. Half the theater was like out of their seats, like, what the fuck am I looking at? So yeah, without a doubt, kill of the year, the yoga kill. But sadly, I did find the first half of the film a little dull. I just, after a while, the sound of crunching leaves turned into nails on a chalkboard to me. It was just too much. Like I said this during our original review, and I'll say it again now. This would have been a great segment in a horror anthology, like a VHS movie or something like that. But as a full, fleshed out feature length, it needed more. It needed a little bit more. And, Don mentioned a little bit more backstory. Yeah, I probably could have used a little bit more of that. But, just that first half, I just found it to be like, once we get through that first scene of kills, after that, the novelty of walking through the woods has been worn out on me. So yeah, unfortunately, I did enjoy the movie, but definitely did not come anywhere near my top 10. But yeah, absolutely agree with Don. Kill of the year, without a doubt.
Okay. I actually agree pretty much with what Venom said. It's not on my list, but if we were making a list of like kills of the year, it's definitely getting. It might be actually get a couple of them, so just because they were so good. But on to my number 8. So 6 months ago, if you asked me about this movie, I would have predicted it would be higher on my list. But that just shows how many quality movies have come out since. This is, I won't even set it up. It's Late Night with the Devil. This is one that I had heard, well, I'm sure lots of people I had heard from all the way back to last year, because I believe it was already shown in festivals, but it just took a while to get the release. Luckily, it got a theatrical release, at least a short one in a lot of cities, mine being one of them. So I was able to see it on the big screen, and I just really enjoyed it. I love the kind of late night talk show setting. I thought they did a pretty good job setting it up from that era. I liked the guests. I liked where it went. I guess like the main criticism I've heard of it is like the third act, or not, maybe not even the whole third act, but the last 20 minutes or so kind of gets a little convoluted, and I can see that. Maybe that might keep it off some people's list or keep it higher. But for me, by that point, I was just along for the ride. I thought that it was highly entertaining, and it was like another way to do a found footage. I guess if you consider this a found footage, uh, sometimes with any subgenre, you can get stuck on like the trappings of movies that come before it. But I thought this one found a unique way to do it. I think especially with found footage. It's always the question of like, why are you holding a camera? Why are you doing this? So it's kind of neat to see different ways that like modern and future found footage movies come up with, like, well, how can we do this without like the one single most popular way, which is someone running around with a camera. And I thought they did really well. I liked the story, I liked the setup, and I was just thoroughly entertained. So number 8, Late Night with the Devil. Back to you, Venom, for 7.
All right, my number 7 is going to be a film that dropped in theaters in July of this past year. Definitely one that all three of us, I thought, were very high on. Even with all of us being very high on it, it actually did go up a little bit on my list after rewatch over the last couple of weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed the characters in it. I do wish that there were more kills in the movie, because ultimately there is only one on-screen kill in this entire movie, and it's not someone that we want to watch die, sadly. So yeah, my number 7 is gonna be Oddity. This wooden statue is the stuff of fucking nightmares. I absolutely love what they did with this statue. I love, the fact that it reminds you of the Golem, but it's not like just a blatant ripoff of the Golem. Like, there's a little bit more backstory to it, or maybe not more, but a little bit less backstory, I should say. But just how it's utilized in this movie and everything else, absolutely loved it. I love our main character. The actress's name is Carolyn Bracken, who plays dual roles as both Danny and Darcy in this movie. And man, the first time I saw this movie, I mentioned it when we reviewed it on Fresh Cuts. The first time I watched this movie, I didn't even realize that was the same actress. I didn't realize it was the same actress playing the two characters, because they're so different. Their style, their mannerisms, the way they carry themselves, just all of it. It's so different that I just wasn't cognizant of that. But then obviously by the second watch, it's like, oh yeah, that's the same person playing both roles, which of course elevated the movie for me a little bit. Whenever I see movies with characters playing, with actors playing dual roles, if they do both roles well, then it's something that I'll almost always praise. So yeah, my number 7 is going to be Oddity.
Just missed my list.
Nice. Oh, man. I'll probably have things to say about Oddity coming up. But, Dawn, let's go with your number 7.
All right. Well, for once, we're finally not going to segue into something, because mine doesn't seem to have been brought up so far. So, yippee. My number 7 is VHS Beyonds. I absolutely adore anthologies. I am a huge fan of them, and I'm always down to check them out, regardless of where they come from. Style, if you're just picking out a bunch of directors and just getting your friends together, or if you're going to tackle it yourself, doesn't matter to me. I'm a huge fan regardless, so that's always going to pique my interest. And even though I don't think it reaches the heights that some of the earlier installments did, this is still a really fun one and definitely has a lot to like. Several of the segments are absolutely chilling, and one in particular is outright horrifying. Um, I absolutely love two of the segments in here. One is potentially going to be one of my favorite segments in the genre. It was just fantastic, and I absolutely loved it. Um, it does have a few questionable segments. Some of the usual tropes of the genre do pop up here and there, but overall, it's just a minor nitpick. There's a lot to like here, and it's a worthy addition to the series. So I will say number 7 is VHS Beyond.
Love it. Yeah, I think VHS Beyond was definitely a step. Well, for me, it was a step up from a couple of the latest entries, and I've kind of liked most of the VHS movies to varying degrees. I think Viral was the only one that I was kind of middling on, but like all the other ones, I would say I'm a fan of just to varying degrees, and Beyond is no different. All right, so for my number 7, this is one of the more eerie and disturbing movies that I saw this year. It had a wonderful ad campaign. I don't remember if they ever actually released a trailer versus little tidbits, like creepy tidbits about the movie in like what 10-15 second snippets that you would get when you're at the theater before a movie in place of where like a trailer would be. And I thought, if anything, this is one of the more eerie movies, disturbing, kind of uncomfortable, and I don't know what more to say about it without spoiling it. So it would be Long Legs, Nick Cage. What the hell, Nick Cage? You just creep me the hell out. Particular scene when you come in after you've been apprehended. Wow, the hell's going on there? Micah Monroe, love her. I thought she did a great job. And the way this wraps up, some people didn't like how it wrapped up, but I thought it was amazing. The kind of the twist and what they did with that, and when you find out like more pieces to the puzzle of what's going on, because you could have kind of just ended it on like, well, we got him, but the evil is still out there, and left it more kind of like uh anonymous about like what exactly is still out there. But they told us like, okay, this is like how everything was being set up and why it seemingly was working when it seemed almost nonsensical if it was like only this person. And man, I just love it. And I love creepy movies because in an era where like not an era, but like an age where you don't get scared a lot, I think like one of the emotions that horror can make us feel as adults is more like creeped out and like uncomfortable versus actually being scared. And I thought this movie did a great job at eliciting those feelings as it went by. So my number 7 is Long Legs. Back to you, Venom.
All right, this will be an easy one. My slasher of the year is coming in at number 6, and that is Terrifier 3. Terrifier 3 is a half step down for me from Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2, for whatever it's worth, just kind of worked a little bit better, and I don't think any kill is ever going to affect me the way that Allie kill did in part 2. Just, God, how torturous that scene was, and everything that Art does to that girl, and she's still fucking alive when the scene ends. Everything about that kill worked for me. It's uncomfortable. It's not something I enjoy watching, mind you, but when I pop in Terrifier 2, I know it's coming, and the fact that it still elicits that kind of feeling in me absolutely makes it my favorite. But Terrifier 3, like I said, they kept up the kills. The kills are great. Art the Clown is awesome. I'm I differ from Don in that I totally understand the fandom for Terrifier, for Art the Clown, excuse me. I just something about his giddiness and just his facial expressions, not just when he's happy, but also when he's angry. Just about everything that Art does tickles me in one way or another. Even when he's cutting someone in half with a chainsaw and then making blood angels in the blood pool. I'm sorry, it's something about the joy that Art is feeling somehow gets transferred through the screen and just makes people love him. It's not like mind you, it's not like I'm cheering for Art the Clown. It's not like I want to see him go around and kill half of this town. Not at all. But goddamn, just the sheer joy of watching him do what he does is still great for me. So even though it's a half step down, it still comes in at number 6. That is, of course, Terrifier 3. And just like Don, I am very much looking forward for Terrifier 4 because I really want to just get to the end of this story. I don't want to get to the end of Terrifier movies necessarily, just this particular story arc that they're on right now. I really want to see where this story goes. So yeah, hopefully, we get Terrifier 4 sooner than later, and hopefully that won't be the last Terrifier movie. I just hope that they kind of finish this arc and then move on to something else with Art and maybe, another possessed person like Victoria or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, number 6, Terrifier 3.
Yeah, I feel like with the Terrifier movies, as long as you like him at a certain base level, why wouldn't you be looking forward to another one? It's kind of like almost like the 80s slasher franchises in a sense where like sure some of them like each one that comes out your rating might go up or down slightly, but if you're into Art the Clown murdering people in grotesque and violent ways, well, guess what? You're going to be happy with like another 90 to 2 hours of him doing it, All right. Yeah, on to Dawn for number 6.
All right. Well, this one is going to be, I'm fairly sure, my solo shot at this. I know that I was the highest one when we did this one, and I proclaimed it as very much one of my movies the second we covered it. So, like I said, I'm fairly certain that this will be a one-shot only kind of appearance. My number 6 is Carved, the Hulu original. I think it was just around Halloween when it came out, or yeah, it was like one of those that came out right around there. I had an absolute blast with this. This is very much a film that I have very, very off the wall tastes. So yeah, I'm fairly certain that I was the only one that enjoyed this as much as I did. It was an absolute joy to watch this one. Just a ton of fantastic action sequences, tons of fun chasing, just chase the creature around. Just so many different little elements here and there that just absolutely worked for me. Again, I know that I'm very much in the minority with this one, but yeah, I absolutely enjoyed it. And like I said, I'm fairly aware that I'm the only one that will have this one on their list, especially one this high. But probably maybe not for me as much as a repeat viewing every Halloween season, but I definitely really want more to watch this one because fantastic atmosphere, great action, lots of cheesy, creature encounters. And again, just one that just tickled me the right way. Number 6 is Carved.
Yeah, I enjoyed Carved too. I mean, it's nowhere near my top 10, just because, I don't know, kind of comedic horror like this doesn't usually end up in my top 10, but I mean, I did enjoy these kills. I enjoyed, the monster for the most part. The movie takes place completely at night, so they're able to hide some of the weaker CGI scenes. Not that there's that many, but some of the scenes where the pumpkin is actually like walking around on its tendrils maybe don't look as good as it could have. But like I said, the fact that it's at night the whole time, they're able to hide some of their, some of their lesser shots, if you will, but I totally enjoyed it. And hey, Mr. Crockett is in it, so yeah, I liked Carved. It was fun.
All right, on to my number 6. Now, with my 6, I should do a little bit of a setup because this is kind of a year where I think a lot of my honorable mentions are gonna kind of be like tweener movies where you talk to 10 people and you're gonna get 10 different answers. Is it horror? Is it not horror? Should it belong on a horror list? Should it not? This movie I was going back and forth on, but because I saw an interview with the director, the writer director, that they made the movie with the intent of it being horror, I said, okay, fine. I will throw a bone to this one and put it in the horror section because once I decided I'll consider it horror for this purpose, there was no way it wasn't going to be on my list because I thought it was a very good, like bordering on great movie. And then later on, when we get to honorable mentions, you'll see like the other ones, and I'll say a little more on that subject. But for now, my number 6 is I Saw the TV Glow, and like I announced this one knowing perfectly well that at least 50% of like listeners or anyone that comes across is going to be not a horror movie. I'm not going to argue that it is or isn't for anyone personally because I can see both sides of it and I understand. But like I said, I threw this one a bone because the director said that's how they intended the story to be. I really like the themes of like trying to be cool with your true self and live your life. This one had the kind of the obvious story, but then the subtext. I like stories that where even if you don't personally relate to the specific thing the main character is going through, you can still take the greater message and apply it to almost everyone in certain ways. I thought the movie was beautifully shot. I loved the score. I thought some of the stuff was creepy looking. There, the little show that they watched, and I liked kind of like the messages at the end of the film when like sometimes when you look back on things that you had a certain perspective on through like a fresh set of eyes, you're like, wait, it wasn't quite what I liked. And the kind of lesson that you take from the end of the movie is it's kind of like a down sad ending. Like if you're kind of going with what the movie is trying to say of how our main character kind of ended up. Technically, we have two main characters, and I think it turned out more fortunate for the one character that kind of exits the movie a little earlier. But for our character that we stick with through the end, it's kind of a bittersweet ending. And anyone who's seen the movie would understand. For anyone who wasn't, I'm not going to get any more detailed than that. But flame away, because my number 6 pick is I Saw the TV Glow.
I'm gonna say that ending's not bittersweet. It's just bitter. Like I mean, thinking about everything that guy's gone through his life, everything that he's denied himself, his self identity. Yeah, I'm gonna say that ending is just bitter. Like there's nothing sweet about it, in my opinion. I mean, yes, he ends, he gets to go home and be with his family, blah blah blah. But it's like, did he really even want a family? That's the thing. Like, I feel like this movie is a horror movie if you've ever had self-identity issues. If you've ever, not known your place in the universe or not, knew exactly who you were or what you were on the inside, then I see this movie as a horror film. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But if you've never had an identity crisis, you've never, had any questions about who you are inside or out, then you probably watch this movie and you're just like, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, why did I watch that? You know what I mean? So it's definitely a movie made for a very specific type of audience. And if you are, of that demographic, then yeah, I think you're going to absolutely love this movie. I've seen this movie at the top of people's top 10s. I'm not kidding. I've seen at least 2 people where this is their number 1 movie of the year, YouTubers mostly, but still. And I'm not going to argue because, even though I maybe didn't walk away from it thinking, oh, that was one of the best things I saw this year, I appreciate it for everything that it did, the messaging that it had, the subtext, all of it. So, the movie wasn't necessarily made for me, but if it was made for you, you probably love it and you probably agree that it's 100% horror. So I'm okay with it. I'm not going to make a big deal about it.
And my last thing I meant to say to my main spiel, but I also appreciate the '90s setting. I like after I got done seeing that, I was kind of following like the timeline of when they're saying that it puts the main character like somewhat close to my age group. So it was kind of cool to see. I appreciate when you can make a time capsule film without beating the viewer over the head. Like it's not like we had a '90s movie poster in every scene in a bedroom, or it's not like they went out of their way to like, oh, let's find all the pop hits from the '90s and put them in there. They had some music in there that sounded '90s like, but like it wasn't just like, oh, let's go find the top 40 playlist and put it in there. Um, the use of like VHS, the use of this was kind of like the pre-internet on the cusp of the internet era. So like the show that they were watching was kind of on like one of those weird public access channels that sometimes your old rabbit ears on a TV could pick up, but not always. So like a lot of times you were discovering stuff out there on an inconsistent basis. And to me, I really identified with that time period of coming of age. I was born in '80, but like I don't consider myself like a full-on '80s kid because I was still like a baby for most of the '80s. So I kind of consider myself almost like a late '80s through the '90s kid. So I really just identified with the time period too. So maybe that gives me like a bigger soft spot for the movie as well. But anyways, enough on that. Back to you, Venom, for number 5.
Yeah, you're a '90s kid. I'm an '80s kid. You're a '90s kid. Solidly. I have very little memories of what happened when I was 7 or 8, you know? So the '80s is, for me, being born in 1970, the '80s is, you know, where I became who I became. And I'm going to say the same thing for Mike. Being born in 1980, you became who you are in the '90s. So you're a '90s kid.
Yeah, because
be proud of it. Be proud of it.
Because like any '80s memories where I really had the utility of like, oh, I'm gonna choose this to watch. I'm gonna go. It was more like the last couple years of the '80s, not like the majority.
Exactly. Yeah, same with me. All right. So, wow, we're halfway through already. God damn, we're making great time. Maybe we will be out of here in less than 3 hours. Go figure. All right. My number 5 is one that's already been discussed. So I'm still going to talk a little bit about it because of how surprised I am, both after I watched it and the fact that it's this high in my top 10. But this is my found footage film of the year and my anthology film of the year. And that is, of course, VHS Beyond. Now, when they announced this as being a sci-fi entry, I was thoroughly disgusted. I don't like sci-fi. I'm not a big sci-fi guy. But the stories in this movie, the individual segments in this movie, to me, they have a sci-fi tinge, but they're still solidly horror. I mean, from Stork to Furry Little Friends to, the last segment, like, yes, there's sci-fi all over it, but they're solidly horror, considering what's happening to the protagonist in every segment. It's still solidly horror. So I was kind of surprised about it. But then when I rewatched it this week, I made a realization. VHS Beyond has my favorite wraparound of any VHS movie. I wasn't thinking about that when we originally reviewed it. The wraparound of the first 2 VHS movies was very basic, just burglars breaking into a house, finding a bunch of VHS tapes and watching them. And then Viral is where it started going off the rails with some of their wraparounds. But this one, with the Asian kid trying to prove that aliens exist, this was by far my favorite wraparound. And plus it was told in a documentary style. Not just found footage where we're trying to figure out what exactly is going on, if there's even dialogue in the wraparound. But yeah, solid wraparound, great segments. There's not one segment in this movie I don't enjoy. Obviously, I like some more than others. Stork is amazing. I absolutely fucking love that segment. Furry Little Friends is a weird segment. I don't know if it really belongs in VHS Beyond necessarily, but I'll allow it. And then the final segment, written by Mike Flanagan and directed by Katie Siegel, I just rewatched that again this week, the VHS Beyond, and man, that last segment is actually when you really, really watch it and kind of try to dissect it with a fine-tooth comb. It's like there's so much going on in that final segment, and the shit that poor woman is going through in that final segment. I'm sorry, but it's solidly horror. Yeah, it's taking place on a UFO, but it's fucking horror. So, yeah, No arguments here. My number 5, VHS Beyond. Absolutely had a great time with it, and I'm glad to see the VHS franchise bounce back after a couple of weak entries. VHS 94 is still my favorite. I don't know that they're going to be able to put one out that tops that one. But yeah, VHS Beyond was a big surprise for me. So yeah, number 5.
It's also kind of cool that like because it's tied to Shutter, it's kind of like a signature series. I guess that and Hell House as well. And other than the Last Drive-In, but like it's kind of cool that Shutter has like almost like a signature series that they keep making sequels to. But
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to more of them.
all right, Don, let's get your number 5.
All right, my number 5 is another one that I remember being probably the highest on, but who knows? I almost forgot to mention this, that this is probably, I was going to say that the first year I can remember where I was completely unsure of what our number ones were going to be. I think I got Venom's down. I think I'm 90% sure what Venom's is, but Mike is a total left field. I don't know what it is. So I'm kind of glad that it's not a surprise, because the last few years I thought it was pretty obvious what our number ones were going to be. So there wasn't really much surprise on that end. So I will say that's kind of a fun thing. But yeah, in any event, this is the one that I remember being the highest on. But again, I could be wrong. My number 5 is Abigail. For me, I thought the only thing wrong with this one was the fact that it gave away what the girl was from the very beginning of the marketing trailers. Because if you went into this one not knowing what was going on and you just discovered everything the same way the characters do, this one would have been so much more fun. The
You're
setup
right.
is fun. Yeah. Yeah, the setup is fantastic. I love the way that it pulls everything off. We get the slow reveal of the kills and the mysterious disappearances around the house. And then when you finally realize what's going on, this thing just turns into a balls out, fun, action-packed romp. And yeah, bloodshed all over the place, some great kills, absolutely fantastic action sequences with tons of over-the-top stunt work, lots of flying through the air and all kinds of supernatural induced goodness there. Just god damn it, why the hell did they have to tell us she was a vampire from the very beginning? I mean, ugh. If you didn't know that and you just discovered it the way that the characters did, this movie would have been so much more fun, because you know from the very beginning that, oh, well, they're going to get fucked because she's a vampire. And everything that takes place in here should have been just revealed as the way that the characters do, and I would have had so much more fun with it. But either way, there's still, like I said, lots to like here. Just keep that in mind, although that should be kind of a difficult since I just spoiled it again for everybody that didn't know. But either way, my number 5 is Abigail.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually go ahead and confirm Don's thoughts, because as everyone who listens to us knows, I don't watch trailers. I try not to read blurps about movies before they come out, and I knew that there was something up with this little girl, but without seeing a trailer or even reading anything about it, I just knew that there was going to be something supernatural about it. I think the reason that the filmmakers went ahead and marketed this as a vampire movie was because I think they thought the ending was going to be a bigger, like a mind blown type ending. I think that they thought that ending was going to like blow people's minds, and that people were going to walk away from that movie going, oh, wow, awesome, blah, blah, blah. Well, I fucking hated that ending. I absolutely goddamn hated that fucking ending. But I love the movie. But because that ending was so bad, and when I say ending, I don't mean like the final fight or the final set piece. I mean literally the last shot of the movie, where we find out more about Abigail's lineage, let's say. It completely lost it for me, and it pretty much killed. I'm not going to say it killed the movie, because I have rewatched it since then, and it is still a fun time. I still hate that ending. In fact, I don't even watch the ending anymore. As soon as Abigail's done killing Dan Stevens, I just stop the movie. That's the end to me. And if that was the true end, this movie would be in my top 10. But unfortunately, because of that extra little bit that they put on it, it just lost it for me. But yeah, I agree with Don. Fun-ass movie. And yes, the fact that I didn't know specifically that she was a vampire, obviously when you see the poster, you know there's something up with this little girl. And the fact that she has blood all over her mouth, you flip a coin, So, but yeah, the fact that I didn't know, I thought I had a great time with it. By the way, Dan Stevens, was this the year of Dan Stevens or what? Man, fucking Godzilla versus Kong, or Godzilla X Kong, I should say, as a kaiju dentist. He's in Abigail. He's in Cuckoo. I mean, yeah, this was Dan Stevens' year. So kudos to him. And yes, I agree with Don. Absolutely fun movie. I did like it. Just like I said, the ending kept it off my top 10. That's all.
Understandable.
Yeah, the way they cut the trailer, it was almost like they feel like they didn't want it to be a surprise. It was weird. Maybe they thought that they needed to tell everyone the horror element to get it across that it was a horror movie, because they thought that a bigger audience would show up if they knew that it was a vampire movie. Because I do agree, like, if you go into this movie a blank slate, then it definitely, I'm thinking back, because I haven't rewatched it since I saw it in the theater, but I'm looking at the sequence and events that leading up to it. There's really nothing that alludes to her being a vampire until the reveal. It's not like they're dropping all these breadcrumbs. It's just this person was kidnapped, and she's like a high value, I think, ransom kidnapper or kidnappee. And then when we get the reveal, we get the reveal. But the way the trailer's cut, it's like they had no anticipation of wanting it to be a surprise. All I can think of is like they felt with this premise, we need to get people out by saying, look, it's a vampire movie. Maybe that's all I can think of as far as why they put that and told everyone up front what that reveal was. But
I'm telling you, they probably thought that ending was going to be like much more effective than it actually was, and whatever, not effective for me. Whenever that particular character is utilized in modern movies, I hate it 99% of the time. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, my number 5. So when I say what it is, some people will be like, whoa, that should be way higher. Some people will be like, that should be way lower. It ended up right in the middle for me. And it's the last movie I saw in the theater, or the last horror movie I saw in the theater for 2024, and that is Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. This movie, it does just about everything right that you would want in a Nosferatu movie. It's slow, brooding, beautiful cinematography. I like the sequences in the castle. I like what we get on the ship. Perhaps like there's a little bit of overkill in the third act before we kind of get the final confrontation. But overall, I was a huge fan of it. I thought it looked good, sounded good. I thought the performances were all good. I know there's like the controversy about like, oh, should Orlok look like that or not? It wasn't a huge determining factor one way or the other for me. His design. I mean, I saw the jokes about it. I laughed at the jokes, but like it didn't really affect the movie itself for me. But overall, had a good time with it. It was cool to get this at Christmas time. It's not the norm to get a big, huge horror release in the month of December, let alone Christmas Day. So kudos to all the people that were actually able to go out on Christmas Day to see it. I had to wait a couple days just because of family stuff. But yeah, Robert Eggers, he tends to be when he's making a horror movie, he tends to be mainstays on my top 10 lists. And this was no exception. So actually, I don't think I made a list like the year The Witch came out, but I know it would have been on my top 10, but I'm trying to think, like this might be actually number 5 might be like the lowest spot a movie of his has taken on the top 10, but I'd have to do research, which I'm not going to do now. So anyways, that's my number 5. Over to you, Venom, for number 4.
To make a comment on Nosferatu, anybody who has a problem with the way that Count Orlok looks in this movie, do your fucking history. Okay? Kazakh royalty looked exactly like Count Orlok. Kazakh royalty, the Kazakhs were the ruling class in Romania, Wallachia, Transylvania, whatever you want to call it, in the mid 1800s. And the way that Count Orlok looks, the way that he has his hair, his mustache, his clothing, it is all period accurate. So if you have a problem with it, then you have a problem with history. So get over yourself. And that's all I'll say about Nosferatu for now. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is my creature feature of the year, much to Don's chagrin, I'm sure, because there was another creature feature that he and I both really enjoyed that I'll be talking about a little bit later in my honorable mentions. But for this one dropped in April, 2 weeks after another Spider movie dropped in theaters. Of course, that was Sting. And this movie, of course, dropped 2 weeks later on Shudder. This is coming to us from France, and this is Infested. I fucking love this movie. I watched this movie twice this week as rewatches. I had such a good time with my first rewatch. I had to watch it again two days later. So this movie does so much for me because it gives us that perfect mix of arachnophobia and eight-legged freaks. You get the first half of the movie where the spiders are fairly normal size. They're still larger than normal, but they're still fairly, you can deal with them. They're not as terrifying unless they're in large numbers, of course. But then once the second half of the movie starts and the spiders start taking out people, and they start growing in size, then it turns into eight-legged freaks, and we get that spectacular final scene in the parking lot with all the SWAT team members just firing in every direction at all these spiders. It's one of my favorite scenes of the year. I had an ear-to-ear grin on my face the entire time, from the time that character slams the door open, and then there's that moment of silence where all the cops are just waiting, and then suddenly, wham, just a barrage of fucking spiders coming out. Yeah, this movie absolutely worked for me. And and by the way, this movie is somewhat scientifically accurate. The breed of spider in this movie is known to grow in size generation to generation to protect against predators. Now, obviously, you're not going to get a spider the size of a Volkswagen Beetle necessarily, obviously, in the wild anyway, but they do get big depending on how, the predators that are around. So I want to give the movie kudos for that too, because especially Don and I, because we have a creature feature podcast, we do tend to kind of make fun of the science in a lot of creature features. So I wanted to point out that this one is, not 100% accurate, but it's more accurate than most spider movies. And I also like this one a lot more than Sting, because Sting had that forced family drama that I just did not care about. I didn't give a rat's ass about the family in Sting at all. All the scenes with the spider in Sting were great, and I loved it. And then every scene with the family arguing just brought the movie down. With Infested, I actually cared about these characters. They were more organic. They were the younger kids who were dealing with the death of the death of their last parent, their mother. I don't know if dad must have died long before the movie. And seeing them, try to deal with the financial situation of owning that apartment and trying to fix it up so that they can sell it, while our main character is like selling sneakers. I mean, I see a lot of myself in that guy, because, I sell Funko Pops online trying to make money because I haven't been working for over a fucking year now. So I saw so much of myself in these characters, and even in how they handled the situations, like not a lot of stupid character decisions. Because don't forget, the people were quarantined. They were stuck in the building. So it's not like, and you're not going to sit in your apartment and just wait to die. So like most of the character decisions in this movie, I'm okay with. I love the speed of the spiders for those early attacks. There's a couple attacks that if you blink, you'll miss it. They're so fast, and I love that. And then, of course, like I said, just the eight-legged freak style finale in the parking garage just totally worked for me. So yeah, my number 4 is Infested.
Nice.
All right. Yeah. It's crazy because, like, two Spider movies to choose from. And listening to different people's lists, I was always like curious if one or both would make it and which one and why. Because they kind of came out, close to each other.
Two
Did
weeks
they release
apart.
close to each other? Yeah,
2 weeks
Yeah.
apart. Yeah, Sting dropped on April 11th. Infested dropped on April 26th. So yeah, literally 2 weeks apart.
Okay. Yeah, because I know we covered them pretty close together, but I was like, yeah, I just couldn't remember if that's how they released. But yep, for sure. Cool. All right, let's get Infested with Dawn's number 4 pick.
All right. Well, funny Venom mentioned creature feature because this is my creature feature of the year, and I'm pretty sure this is the one that he was mentioning earlier when he started his spiel. Forever there was a film made for me for Fresh Cuts. This was it. My number 4 is Under Paris. Yep, me liking a shark movie. Who knew? Yeah, this is just a lot of fun. Takes a while to get going, but I don't care. That final act is just glorious. Some of my favorite shark action in the genre. The sequence in the tunnels is just incredible. I had so much fun with that. Just the cheesy goodness just dripping off the screen. I had an absolute blast with it. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what other city they're going to topple next because I really want more films in this universe. I want more of these sharks out there, and I'm really looking forward to where this one goes because, yeah, this was an absolute blast. And yeah, it's high budget shark movie, just exactly what I like in my life. So, number 4 for me, Under Paris.
Yeah, this movie also had one of my favorite final shots of the year. That final shot of Paris underwater is fucking spectacular. I know it's CGI, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But just seeing our final 2 survivors on top of fucking Notre Dame while the city is just flooded and there's sharks everywhere. Chef's kiss. Mwah, loved it.
Yeah, I was wondering because I was like, okay, we're on like the top half of the list, and there was no shark movie yet. I was wondering, and we got there, Don. We got there. All right, so number 4 is actually one of the only 2 on my list that were not in Fresh Cuts. Which there's a specific reason for that, which we'll get to when we do our honorable mentions, but I'll leave that for then. So my number 4, and it's one I don't even know if either of you guys have seen because we didn't really even talk about it off the show that much, and it is Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. Have either of you even seen it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, good. All right, so I won't be just whistling past the graveyard on this one. So I've had difficulty almost trying to describe this one. Is it like a dark comedy? Is it coming of age? It's a little mix of both. Like one, as far as the story goes, one of the comparisons I would say is Let the Right One In, but not even so like it's kind of like that if we're talking about like a young vampire seeking like some type of companion for a specific reason. That's what it has in common, but even using that movie doesn't really describe what this one is. So basically the brief setup is we have a female vampire. She looks to be about like preteen or early teenage teenager age, and I'm assuming because it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I'm assuming like in their process of like puberty or going into young adulthood, in order to become like the full-on vampire predator, they have to get their first kill. But this vampire is like a humanist. She doesn't want to kill. She doesn't want to become that. So of course she's getting pressure from her family. Like I think the father's a little more sympathetic, where the mom is like the mom, the sister, and maybe the aunt are like, no, you need to hurry up and do this. It's time. You're at the age, and I can't remember if it's gonna end up hurting her health from not doing it, or if it's just that they just want her to become part of the family, the vampire family. So basically, she ends up forming this friendship with this kind of like loner, suicidal teen, and he kind of says to her, "Well, hey, I don't want to live anymore, so I can be your first kill." And they kind of form a bond and a friendship over that, and that's kind of like the setup, and it goes from there. I know this one probably hasn't been watched by a lot of people, so I'm not gonna like get into any more of the story than that. But yeah, I really liked it. I like when you can get like a familiar story, in this case vampires, and kind of put it in like a totally different type of setting. Going into this, I hadn't heard a lot about it, but it had comedy in the title, so I was like, is this gonna be like a What We Do in the Shadows, like trying to be over the top comedy? But it's really not. You could almost say it's not comedy, because I don't feel that any of the comedic elements were there to like make you like ha ha laugh. Like there's some awkward situation comedy about it, I guess, just what you would get in a coming of age movie. But other than that, it's kind of like dark. Hits on a lot of issues of growing up and uh, puberty, hitting young adulthood, kind of like the expectations of family and those around you. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot to it that like even I probably didn't even get everything out from just the one watch, but I really liked it. It was one of my favorite discoveries of the year that I didn't know a whole lot going in. And yeah, that is my number 4. And since we didn't talk about it on Fresh Cuts, if you guys want to say anything about it, regardless of how much you did or didn't like it, I'm game.
I liked it. I think when it comes to like character studies of vampires, I think I lean more towards like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Like I remember really, really enjoying that one a lot more. Humanist Vampire is still very good. It still gets a recommend from me. I think people should still check it out, but it just didn't have enough vampire stuff in it. And I don't know, like the coming of age stuff. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sick of coming of age or not, or if it just didn't work for me as well in this movie. But I mean, the movie is objectively well made. It's well acted, well written. It just kind of left me wanting more. So yeah, that's kind of where I sit on it.
Bland non-horror bullshit. Fuck this movie.
Wait, what was the first part of that?
I said bland non-horror bullshit. Fuck this movie.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god, it's awesome.
I heard like the second half of that the first time. All right, we are moving right into our top 3. How about that? So Venom, what do you got for us at number 3?
All right, well, number 3 comes to us from a man who is slowly becoming my favorite director. His first movie was my number 1 of 2015. His second movie was my number 2 of 2017. His third movie was not a horror film, but it might potentially be my favorite of his, because goddamn did I have a good time watching that. And then this past Christmas, of course, brought us Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Now, this movie would have been my number 1 because I talked about it, obviously, on the last episode.
And that's what I had you pegged as. That's the one that I had pegged for you. So now I'm really curious what your number 1 is.
I said it on the episode, too, that I just wish that Robert Eggers did some more original stuff with the story. Like he basically, and since we've recorded that episode, I've watched multiple interviews with Robert Eggers and found out more about what Nosferatu means to him. I mean, literally, it was the first stage production he'd ever put on. It was his first paying gig. It was supposed to be his second movie. I mean, we've been hearing about Robert Eggers' Nosferatu for 10 years now. It was supposed to come out after The Witch, but obviously it didn't. But I think it benefits the movie because now Robert Eggers is, he's an A-list director now. So he can actually command a higher budget, command, bigger names in the cast, as we see with Nosferatu. So as I said on the original review, from a technical aspect, 10 out of 10. Nothing about this movie on a technical aspect can be denied. the writing, the cinematography, the score, the special effects, just the lighting, the fucking use of light and shadow in this movie is fucking spectacular. It is easily, in my opinion, the best made movie of the year. If this were an objective list where I was actually trying to put an objective list of the top 10 best movies of the year, I'm pretty sure Nosferatu would be number one. But this is, of course, our list of our top 10 favorite movies of the year. And like I said, Nosferatu, I walked out of the theater saying, well, that was a technical masterpiece, but I got nothing new from the story. And ultimately, Nosferatu is a very old story. And, you know, the last adaptation, even though there was kind of an indie Nosferatu in 2023, the last true adaptation was back in, 76 with Klaus Kinski. So I understand that this is a story that people maybe aren't sick of yet, like, you know, Dracula or, you know, Batman's origins or Spider-Man's origins, you know, things like that we've seen ad nauseum in cinema. So I understand why he didn't change any of the story, on top of the fact that when I found out how he reveres this movie, it was literally his favorite movie growing up, the original 1922 version, of course. And like I said, he put it on as a senior school play. What happened was a director saw the school play and actually paid him to then do it at a community theater, which was his first paying gig right out of high school. So, like I said, I understand why he didn't change the story. I just would have liked to have seen some new elements in it. But what's in it is spectacular. It is damn near close to a 10 out of 10, and it is my number 3 of 2024. And in most years, this might be my number 1, but there are the two movies that are above this one are just endlessly fun, and I could rewatch them ad nauseum, as opposed to Nosferatu, where I kind of got to be in the mood to watch something that gothic and that dark. So, but yeah, still, I'm not going to take anything away from the movie. It is a fucking masterpiece. 10 out of 10, Nosferatu at number 3.
Cool. All right, Dawn, how about your number 3?
All right, well, I'll be quick on this one because this one kind of highlights why I decided to do films from fresh cuts rather than just generally films, you know, from throughout the year. So it enables me to do something like this where I get to highlight something that ordinarily would never really touch my list, but I'm so glad that I can have a chance to share it and shout it out. Number 3 for me is Dario Argento Panico. I am a just absolutely stalwart Argento fanatic. I'm probably one of the only ones that actually still takes Italian Horror Month seriously, at least much more seriously than 22 Shots, even though they invented the damn thing. But yeah, just an absolutely fantastic look into the guy. Probably my favorite. I wouldn't necessarily say my favorite documentary on him, but at least probably in my top 4 or 5. You know, if you're to include, you know, bonus features or interviews from various Blu-ray discs that have been released over the years. It's a great look at the guy, and it's a fantastic starter course because you have his entire career to go off of, and you get bits and pieces of everything rather than just, you know, an in-depth look at Deep Red or an in-depth look at Tenebrae or Suspiria, which I'm pretty sure is, you know, going to be a little bit more conventional, you know, way that people are going to approach documentaries like this. But, you know, I love listening to the guy. I love hearing about him and his work, and he's a fascinating subject. So it doesn't really matter what era of his career you go from, whether it's, you know, his classic 70s stuff or, you know, his bonked out 80s or, you know, the 90s with Ozia and, you know, onward into his direct-to-video stuff. Not necessarily the greatest career, but still an all-time master, and I absolutely adore listening about him. So one that I really wouldn't put for most lists, but because of the format of the show, I'm glad I can include it. So number 3 for me is Dario Argento Panico.
If I actually included documentaries in my top 10, Panico would absolutely be on there. That was easily my favorite documentary of the year. I actually rewatched it long after we reviewed it, just because I may not have the love for Argento that Don has. I'm more of a Fulci guy myself, but the documentary is awesome, and just I learned a lot, like all the depression and everything that he was going through while he was writing Suspiria, and all the stories that he talked about, and even that one story that he talks about actually standing at a windowsill looking down and contemplating jumping. God, imagine all the fucking movies that we miss out on if he did take his life back then. So yeah, Panico, easily my favorite documentary of the year. And just because I watch so many movies, I don't include documentaries, but it absolutely would have made it if I did. So yeah, great choice.
Mike?
Right, yeah. And when we were going over, or not we, when I was going over like a list of like everything that's been discussed and covered, that one kind of did catch my eye because I was like, man, I really did like that documentary, and I was like going back and forth on whether to include
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it is a strong documentary. I do agree. All right, so my number three by chance is the other one that we did not cover on Fresh Cuts. This was dropped on Shutter months ago. It is, yeah, I'd call it a period piece. Yeah, I don't know why I was questioning that. Um, Covers pretty much a dark time in history, but when were times not dark in history if you go far enough back? This one is Devil's Bath, and I love that the setup is kind of like historically accurate as far as how what the story goes. Now, obviously, our specific characters are fictional within a situation that actually took place. Kind of the setup with this is they kind of tell you at the beginning of the movie. I think they tell you at the beginning of the movie. Um, Basically back then, like when if a woman got like stuck into like some loveless marriage or some hell of a life, uh they wanted to commit suicide to get out of it. Well, because they were still highly religious, suicide in their minds would send them to hell, so they would commit some type of atrocity that would get them like arrested and basically capital punishment. um, but with capital punishment, I think they can still ask for forgiveness. Where with suicide, I guess not. Like I don't know all the rules, but like that's how it was. But anyways, this is I can see this being a little contentious with different people because you have to like slow burns, you have to like a slow developing story, you have to be okay with period pieces. But if you are, I think this would be right up your alley. I love the characters in this. I love how the story developed. Um, I love some of the stuff from that era that they used, like the whole horse hair through the skin thing. Oh man, that looked gnarly as hell. And it's like something so simple, right? That like it's not like some over the top gag that you're used to seeing in modern movies. It was just something simple, effective, and historically accurate as far as like punishment went. And I just was a big fan of this one, and I wish more people had seen. I don't even know who's seen it. I'm not talking about our group specifically, but just out there. I don't remember a lot of people talking about it, even though it was on Shutter, and it might still be sitting there on Shutter if you run a
Yep.
search for it. But yeah, I was just really impressed. And the thing with me is like when it comes to period pieces, I'm not always like an automatic fan of period pieces. I think a lot of times they can be set up with a decent story, but they just don't end up very interesting to me. But when they do hit it, when they hit it out of the park for me, they're some of my favorite movies around. And I just thought Devil's Bath. It kind of reminded when we saw Hagasuza that year, where it was kind of like a slow developing story. Now it's very different. That involves like some witch stuff, but it's kind of like that style, almost like a slow developing story. with a kind of like a loose narrative. But I was a huge fan of Devil's Bath, and I saw it early enough in the year that I wasn't sure where it would land. But when I went back to it, it's like I liked it even more. So Devil's Bath is my number 3. Venom, we're all the way to number 2. What do you got?
All right.
Wait, unless you want to say something about Devil's Bath, because we didn't cover it on Fresh Cuts, and I know you've seen it, right?
I enjoyed Devil's Bath. It definitely didn't come anywhere near my top 10. For me, slow burns have to have a big payoff, kind of like a Saint Maud type thing. But this one, the payoff was okay. It just didn't really do a lot for me. And considering the runtime, I mean, this was over 2 hours long. I felt like the ending needed to be more like a jaw-dropping ending. Instead of what we got, which was still good. Don't get me wrong. I agree with almost everything Mike said, but it just, as I didn't rewatch it because it wasn't even in my top 20, but I did watch it earlier in the year, and I did for the most part enjoy it. It was another movie that kind of left me wanting more, just like kind of like Humanist Vampire. It just left me wanting more. Like I could see the DNA of a really, really good movie there. And the fact that Mike has it so high on his list, it isn't going to get any animosity from me. It's a solid film. It just, like I said, I wish we got a little bit more out of it. That's all. Anyway, back to happier news. My number 2. I mean, what can I say about my number 2? Mike has already brought it up, and it is probably the most fun I had at the theater this year. And I think a big part of why I really, really enjoy this movie is because I actually did exist in the 70s. As I already mentioned earlier, I was born in 1970. So I have very vivid memories of the late 70s and watching shows like Johnny Carson and things like that, David Letterman. So this movie before we even got to the horror of the movie, I was already having a good time. Michael Ironside as the narrator does a spectacular job. And, like I said, just watching just the actual late night aspect of it, just watching him go through his nightly, routine and everything else before we even get to the horror of it, I was already sold. And I've watched this movie. This and Terrifier 3 are probably the 2 movies I've watched the most this year. I think I've got to be at like 8 or 9 watches so far for this one. But yeah, great cast, great main, actor, one who I like in almost every movie he does. But like I said, because I had a little bit of a personal connection with this one, because I have a vivid memory of watching late night TV in the 70s and 80s, that makes my number 2 of the year, obviously, Late Night with the Devil. Now, I know Mike mentioned earlier about maybe some people having issues with the last 20 minutes. I 100% do not. I love the end of this movie. It's everything that our main character, Jack Delroy, deserves. Everything that he did, everything that he sacrificed, including his own fucking wife, for what? Success, for money, for fame, for power. He absolutely deserved everything that happens in that final sequence, and I love the effects. Just a couple of days ago, I watched a little YouTube video about that final scene. Did you know that that's all practical? The whole head split, if you will, and all of that's all practical. None of that is CG. And I watched a little behind the scenes video on the making of that effect, and it's awesome. It's actually really great. So that actually kind of elevated the movie a little bit for me, because I was convinced that final set piece was, CGI, but the fact that it's actually practical just kind of elevated the movie to the number 2 spot. So yeah, number 2, Late Night with the Devil, without question.
All right, and I think that is pretty much going to. I think that gives me exactly what I needed to know, because I think I've got your list now.
I think there's only one movie left, so yeah.
No, I figured that there was going to be 2 different ways that this was going to go, and the first one I was sure of was Nosferatu, and now that you say this, I think I've got your list down. I'm still unsure on Mike's, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to be lockstep with this one. My number 2 is Late Night with the Devil.
I think I know what
Yeah.
Mike's number one is, and I'm going to be disappointed when he says it, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, same here. I'm actually kind of surprised that Mike was kind of clueless as to what, like the final 20 minutes, because I thought we actually solved it on the show. I seem to remember.
I remember having that long conversation during the review. We all had different ideas about what that final few minutes of it represented. I remember me asking, like, did it actually happen? Was it a memory, or was that just the devil fucking with them? I don't know that we ever actually definitively came up with we came up with a couple of different explanations that are all viable. But yeah, it's honestly, whatever interpretation you have for the end, it's probably fine. So yeah, rock on.
No, I wasn't saying I was confused. I was just saying that's one of the criticisms people in general have had about it.
I wasn't talking. But just the contention with that last 20 minutes and, a lot, especially the effect, because I know a lot of people were turned off by that effect because the movie, isn't really relying on effects pretty much the entirety of the movie until that final scene. And then suddenly there's this big effect that, like I said, I was convinced was CGI, but the fact that I now know it's practical just elevates it for me. So yeah, whatever.
All right. Moving along to Dawn for his number 2.
Late Night with the Devil. I thought we just talked about this.
Late Night with the Devil.
Yeah, your turn, Mike.
Oh, by the way, Mike was mistaken earlier. He mentioned that there were 2 movies on his top 10 that were not Fresh Cuts movies. You've actually mentioned 4 already, actually.
What were the other ones?
I've counted 3.
Mads, I Saw the TV Glow, Humanist Vampire, and Devil's Bath. None of those were on Fresh Cuts.
I thought we did. I Saw the TV Glow.
I thought we did Mads.
Wait, did we?
I thought we did Mads.
No, we definitely did Mads.
That was like I said, because I counted 3. I thought we did Mads.
No, we didn't do Mads. We talked about it, but we didn't actually do an episode.
Oh, that's what it was.
Maybe that was my confusion then. I remember talking about it with you guys.
Yeah, because I thought we covered.
And I think that was the main show that you talked about it that Don was on when we were talking about.
Oh, that's what it was. Because I did. I was on there for that one Asian show that you guys did. That's where we talked about it.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, that's why I thought we covered Mads, because I counted 3 and I was going to bring it up at the end because I didn't know what his number 1 was, because I remember he said 2 and then he said 3 and I was like, wait, is he going to have another one? Because I thought we covered Mads, but yeah, if you're saying there's 4.
Yep. Mike.
Okay, well, anyways, Mike, number 3 or number 2?
2.
Number 2. This one returned an A-list actress to prominence, and she just walked away with a Golden Globe for it. That should end any suspense about what it is. It's the substance. When we covered it on Fresh Cuts, there was like one major issue I had with it, and I'm not even gonna say that like that opinion is 100% alleviated. But I did rewatch it. It's one of the few ones I did do a rewatch on because I felt like every other element of the movie was so strong that I was like, let me go back to it. And it didn't bug me as much the second time around. So with that issue going way down, everything else about the movie just got that much better. I like movies about kind of like the nastiness of Hollywood. It's kind of like we're movie lovers, right? So we love elements of the movie industry in Hollywood, but I love a good like nasty story about Hollywood and all the gross and horrible elements that go on there, because it's not all bright and shiny. It's not all Hollywood sign stars going on there. There is an underbelly, even for people that were once like at the top, right? And I thought this movie just was very entertaining. I liked the story. I kind of like the setup, and Yeah, and then it turns into like a crazy body horror experience as well. And I mean that finale. What can you say? I as I was watching it, I was just like, damn, they really did go all out for this. Like for me, it was like one of the few times where like the hype from like I think it was cons that it was screening at. Like the hype, I was like, okay, yeah, this actually kind of lived up to like what people were saying coming out of it, at least for me. But yeah, it was just great, and I thought the performances, like even like a character like Dennis Quaid in it, who everyone knows Dennis Quaid, but like he he brought it as kind of like the scumbag producer of that show, and I just thought there was like a lot of like nice little subtle touches to it, with just like some of the smaller characters, some of the side characters, some of the things going on in the background that you don't always get on the first watch. And I just thought it was really well done, kept me engaged, and yeah. So The Substance is my number two.
It's funny because the last 15 minutes of that movie is the reason it is not anywhere near my top 10. I thought that the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of that movie just completely sabotaged all of the seriousness, all of the dark humor and everything that was going on throughout the movie. And it just evolved into a straight horror comedy. Like, to me, that was the same as like watching an Evil Dead 2 or a Return of the Living Dead, that last 15 minutes. It just took all the seriousness out of it. The other issue that I have with this movie is everybody always feels bad for the old starlet that, gets replaced by a younger person. But ask yourselves, do you really want to watch a 55-year-old woman doing exercise on television, or would you rather watch a 25-year-old woman? And I'm not talking about in a sexual way either. I'm just talking straight, just no. And I mentioned it on the show, too, that I felt like Demi Moore's character was incredibly selfish in this movie because she won an Oscar. She had a fucking mansion in the Hollywood Hills. She was obviously a millionaire, and she had 25 fucking years of success in Hollywood. And rather than just stepping aside and letting the next generation in, she gets all greedy and basically ruins another person's career, because another girl would have gotten that job if it weren't for her using the substance. And instead, that girl now is just going to continue being a waitress in, Van Nuys or whatever. And it's like, everybody's always like, oh, I feel so bad for the old starlet. No, fuck you. Do you know what the odds are of making it in Hollywood? It's less than 1 in a million. It's less than 1 in a million. So if you're lucky enough to come to Hollywood and find success, enjoy it and be proud of it and be happy about it. But to sit there and say, older women don't get sexy roles in Hollywood. No shit. No fucking shit. Who the hell wants to watch Kathy Bates, have a lesbian sex scene with Helen Mirren? Fucking no one. But if you talk about Sydney Sweeney and, whatever, Mia Goth or whatever, suddenly, yes, there is more interest there. So maybe it's because I actually live in Hollywood and I've actually worked in this industry that I have this kind of opinion that, don't feel bad for aging starlets. Just don't. They had success. The millions upon millions of people that come to California to try to become an actor or actress don't find the success and then have to move back home with their tails between their legs. Those are the people that I feel bad for. Fuck the Demi Moores of the world. And it bothers me that
not the actual Demi
other
Moore.
review, not the actual Demi Moore, but her character in that movie. Obviously, I love Demi Moore. She's fine. But you know what I'm saying? And I haven't heard not one other reviewer bring this up in any review. Everybody's always like, oh, poor Demi Moore. Oh, she's being replaced by a younger girl. No fucking shit, she's being replaced by a younger girl. She's on a fucking aerobics show. It's not like she's on a science show or something where she can use her brain and her experience. She's literally a piece of eye candy. And for a piece of eye candy to get replaced right after her 50th birthday is not that unusual, and it's not fucking evil. Get over yourselves, people. I'm done. That's my rant for the episode.
Yeah,
Substance.
I mean, I don't really disagree with some of that. See, on my second watch, I saw her less as a protagonist, I guess, and it was
Yep.
just. But to me, that doesn't like it didn't hurt the movie itself, but I understand what you're saying because if you kind of look at her as just like a neutral kind of character and not like good or bad, because I think definitely the first time I watched the movie, I'm viewing it through the lens of like, oh, I'm supposed to be sympathetic to like the aging star that's getting kind of like kicked out of her place in the industry and she wants to, and her insecurities and are forcing her. But then the second I watch it, you can almost flip that and say it's more like her vanity and selfishness and
Yes.
inability to let go of what she once had. Now, while that changes the motivations of the main character, it didn't change my overall enjoyment of the movie. It just gave me a different perspective, but I totally get what you're saying and why. So,
Yeah, everything I'm saying about the Demi Moore's character didn't affect my rating of the movie. I love the movie up until that last 15 minutes. And I do love the effect of that final creature, whatever you want to, I forget the name that it had, but yeah. It looked great, but just like I said, it's just that last scene, it takes away all of the seriousness of the movie, all of the subtext, and just turns it into a horror comedy. And I don't know, it just, like, if the whole movie was like that, I might have liked it a little bit more. Or I don't know if they would have done something a little bit different with that last 15 minutes. I mean, I agree with Mike. They went for it. They definitely went for it, and I'll give them credit for that. Like I said, the effect is gorgeous. I also watched a vignette on YouTube about the effect, the final creature, how they made that, the fact that there's like a mouth biting one of the boobs on the front and all that shit, and Demi Moore's face on the back and all that. The fact that it's all practical, again, I can respect it, but it just changed the whole tone of the movie for me. And I don't know, I walked out of the theater feeling like I got duped or something, like I was watching this very, very serious movie, and then it just turned into a comedy at the end, and that kind of left me with a sour taste in my mouth. So yeah, sadly, The Substance is not on my top 10, obviously.
all right. Well, now that our twos are in the book, this would be the portion of the show that we get into our honorable mentions. So, Venom, you want to kick us off with some of those?
Yeah, I'll go through them quick since most of them have been talked about already. Oh, actually, no, most of them have not been talked about already, but I still won't get too far into it. After all the bullshit I just talked about, The Substance is my number 15 of the year. Like I said, what it did right, it did very, very right, but just it left me with a sour taste in my mouth. And you have to realize is endings are powerful. Endings are how people, the way that they feel about the ending is how they're going to feel about the majority of the movie, because that's the last emotion that they have walking out of the theater is how they felt about that ending. So unfortunately, yeah, The Substance, if it weren't for that ending, would be in my top 10, but it's in my number 15. Number 14 is Under Paris, easily my shark movie of the year. Great time, like I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite final shots of the year. My number 13 is coming in at, this might be a surprise for some people, but it's actually Lisa Frankenstein. I loved Lisa Frankenstein. Yes, it's kind of a coming of age, teen oriented rom-com with horror elements involved, but I thoroughly had a great time with it. I think our main character is spectacular. I liked our creature. I liked the evolution of the creature, how he kind of looked like the Tar Man when he first showed up, but then as time goes on, as he's getting more and more augmentations, he's looking more human all the time. And just the pettiness of I don't want to bring up the specific scene, but there's a scene where the creature does something for Lisa towards the end that is just, you guys know that I'm petty and vindictive as shit. So watching him do that to that guy just put an ear-to-ear grin on my face. So yeah, Lisa Frankenstein, number 13. Here's another one that hasn't been brought up. Number 12 is going to be Immaculate. Immaculate was solidly in my top 10 all year. But then, just as I'm watching more and more stuff, and obviously we got, kind of a glut of good horror movies towards the last 3 months of the year. So Immaculate kept getting bumped down. And then the last honorable mention I have, my number 11, I get to thank Don for this one, because this is a movie that Don mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I had never even heard of, and it fucking has Lauren Lavera in it, who is someone that I absolutely love right now, and I'm willing to watch anything that she's in. So my number 11 is the Italian horror film The Well. Man, this movie was fucking fun. If you guys have not seen The Well, check this out. It's just a great little story. It's just a stranger in a strange land type story, an American in Italy for an art restoration job, and the restoration of that piece of art kind of becomes the catalyst for the film. We get awesome gore. We get a great creature. We get a good Mongo type character that I actually really liked. So, and a fairly satisfying ending. The ending could have been a little bit better, but it's still, considering the story, and the story is not, the reason this isn't in my top 10 is the story is not the most original ever. We've seen this story before. We've seen this ending before. So, it wasn't anything too exceptional, but I had an absolute blast with it. And I just watched it for the first time last night, and it literally almost took Monster out of the 10 spot. Literally only a couple of points below Monster. But yeah, my number 11 is The Well. And that's my honorable mentions, folks. And again, thank you, Don, for recommending The Well. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's my movie of the year.
I can see it.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Don. Any honorable mentions?
So my number 15 is The Burned Over District. Fun little cult movie. Has a few issues here and there, but I definitely had a fun enough time with it. Number 14 for me is Hellhole. Adam's Family kind of getting back on track after that disaster train wreck of a film called Where the Devil Roams. Not nearly as much fun as Hellbender, but I definitely enjoyed this one far more than I should have. Number 13 is Guess Who. I had such a fun time with the premise of this one. Kind of falls off the rails in the third act, but it's definitely a fun enough time, and I enjoyed this one for what it was. Number 12 for me is Sting. I preferred this one over Infested. I enjoyed the family drama over this over the characters in Infested. I think that's the main difference there, because otherwise I think they both kind of cancel each other out. But I enjoyed the family over the inhabitants of the apartment. And number 11, I wanted this one in the list, but just didn't quite make it. Indonesian horror is one of my favorites going right now, and this is one of the masters, so I was a little disappointed we couldn't get to it, but number 11 for me was Grave Torture.
Nice. I was wondering if Grave Torture would make your list on, because
the setup was great. I enjoyed where it was going. I think the final act is just fantastic. It's one of, I think, Joko's strongest pieces. It just took too long to get there. Just hammering home stuff we've already know, the repetitive nature of it all. It just kind of drags the film on longer than it needs to, and it just kind of kept pushing it back off my list. So.
Okay. That was kind of like me with Monster, because there was a good chance Monster was gonna make it on mine, and it just kind of got pushed. So I guess technically that makes it an honorable mention. Another honorable mention is the Filipino zombie apocalypse movie Outside on Netflix. This one, it's another case of it. At least for me, it was a little. I guess you could say it a lot, but it was longer than it needed to be, in my opinion, for what the story was. I did kind of like where it went, but this is definitely the type of zombie apocalypse movie that you get zombie action sprinkled in, but it's really kind of about a father, kind of like a patriarch of the family kind of slowly losing it. Just the pressure of the situation, you're trying to protect your family, you're trying to survive, food's running low, you're never really truly safe no matter where you go. And then you have some other dynamics going on with the family that I don't want to spoil just because I don't know how many people have seen this. And by the way, my honorable mentions aren't ranked necessarily, so I'm just kind of listing them off. Now, something I alluded to earlier with the I Saw the TV Glow pick about the horror or not, a lot of my honorable mentions are ones that they fell on the not horror side of things. Otherwise, there's a good chance they would have been on the list because I thought they were that good. I just didn't find them to be horror movies necessarily. So we'll start with Strange Darling. I really liked it, but it was more like thriller, maybe exploitation even, but not horror. Red Rooms I really liked, but again, it was kind of more psychological thriller than horror. But like these are also movies that I have seen on other people's lists, so again, like it's not worth arguing over me. For me, it's just my personal opinion. And another one, Coffee Table. This movie's set up by something horrific happening, like very early in the movie. But honestly, to me, the rest of the movie felt like a black comedy, dark comedy, like something you're almost getting awkward laughter from because of everybody's reaction as far as the characters, not the viewer. The characters' reactions to everything going on, the main character trying to figure out how to keep under wraps what just happened. To me, it kind of makes for that uncomfortable laughter, not terror or horror. That's the vibe it gave me. But I know for sure some people I've talked to, like even in our extended community, I have a feeling it's going to be on their list and they would put it on the horror side. And again, I'm not going to argue it, but for me, it was more kind of like thriller-ish.
Yeah, for me, it's solidly horror. It didn't make my list because there wasn't enough in there, but I'm one of those people that I didn't chuckle once. Like not once. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I was so horrified by what happens in the first 15 minutes of the movie that the whole rest of the movie is just me trying to like I put myself in that guy's situation the whole time I'm watching the movie. Like, what the hell would I say to my wife? What would you say to anybody? Like, what would you say to the police? Like, man, like that to me was probably the most horrific situation of 2024. And it's so realistic because it could actually happen. But man,
that pluses are wrong with you guys.
What else do I got? Low Lifes that I saw on Tubi. The funny thing is, at the time I saw Low Lifes, it would have been on my list just because at that point in the year it was so bad that I was like, oh, here's something that didn't totally suck. It's top 10 as of now, but it got pushed as soon as we started getting good movies. But it is one of the better Tubi originals I've ever seen. So
absolutely, yeah, 100% agree. It was actually in my top 5 for part of the year, and it just kept getting pushed out, and now it's not even top 15. So yeah, but I still agree. Amazing film, great film.
Okay, yeah, and the last one, like I said, no particular order, but this is the one I saw most recent. So it's, I think it's pronounced Abruptio. This is a weird, bizarre movie. It's completely consisting of like these humanoid, almost life-size puppets, and it starts as almost kind of like a murder mystery. And then it evolves into something else by the third act. The puppet design of these people, or I don't even know if you want to say people, they're just uncomfortable to look at. Like it's weird. It has kind of like that humanoid look to them, but obviously they're puppets the whole time. Like they're not trying to trick people. And then you have a lot of familiar celebrity genre voices. Jordan Peele voices a puppet. Robert Englund does. And there's a couple others. I can't remember the entire cast. But, yeah, and there's lots of gore. in it, puppet gore, lots of blood splattering everywhere. This one's a little harder to track down as of now, so I'm assuming a lot of people haven't seen it. But yeah, honorable mention on that one. I actually, you know what? Let me backtrack. It's not hard to track down. It is for rent on Prime. I did like the $1.99. What did we get, like a 48-hour rental? I did that for like a couple bucks, so you can find it. When I said harder to track down, I just mean like you're not gonna get it on a subscription based VOD yet. I could see this though ending up on Shudder. It feels like that type of movie that like eventually Shudder would just grab and you just see it randomly show up out of nowhere. So I would say definitely worth a watch once it pops on there. I couldn't put it on my list because like as far as it being like a great movie, I can't really say that, but it was such like a unique experience because it wasn't like a puppet or two mixed in with like normal people. It was almost like watching a Team America, but they're more humanoid looking, I guess, if I try to explain it that way. But anyways, those are my honorable mentions, all really good. And like I said, a few of them, if I would have put them in the strictly in the horror category, they might have ended up on the list. But anyways, enough of our honorable mentions. It's to the big reveals of the show. So let's get to our number one, starting with Venom. What is your number one movie of 2024?
Well, much like 2024, every year that I've been a podcaster, when I watch my number one movie, I know it's my number one movie. This movie, when I walked out of the theater after watching it the first time, I was so blown away by this atmosphere, the tension throughout the movie from beginning to end. And anyone who knows me knows I fucking love Nicolas Cage. And he gave us a performance for the ages in this one. And in all honesty, this is my horror performance of the year. I know like Naomi Scott in Smile 2 and Demi Moore in The Substance are getting a lot of, praise for their performances. But I mean, Nicolas Cage in this movie absolutely blew me away. So obviously my number one of 2024 is Longlegs. It is one of only two 2024 movies that I've already bought on physical media, the other one being Terrifier 3. And I just watched Longlegs yesterday, and it still does it to me from beginning to end. The movie doesn't just ask for your attention. It fucking commands your attention. Like that score, that off-putting score that has you on edge throughout the entire movie. The fact that Osgood Perkins is constantly using that low-angle camera, so it looks like us as the viewer, we're always looking up at the characters. And that's something that maybe a lot of people who watch the movie maybe didn't even notice, but it's definitely something I noticed. The 70s aesthetic is there. Again, I'm from the 70s, so I can vouch for the fact that this movie nails that 70s aesthetic between the car and the score and everything else. This is without a doubt my number one, and it's not even close. I adore Late Night with the Devil. I genuinely do. I've already said it's probably the most fun I had at the theater this year. But Longlegs, and I actually disagree with Mike about he was saying that his number 1 and 2 from last year would have been his 1 and 2 this year. Nah, Longlegs would have been my number 1 last year as well, and When Evil Lurks would have been my number 2. Longlegs works for me in every fucking way. I can't even look at my phone or a tablet when I'm watching that movie. My eyes are fucking glued to the television. I am so just put off by everything that's happening in it, but I can't look away, and it's fucking spectacular. So, yeah, I don't know what else I could really say. Longlegs is a fucking 10 out of 10 to me. It is one of my favorite Nicolas Cage performances. It actually makes me like Micah Monroe, because I wasn't really that much of a Micah Monroe fan before this. But her performance in this movie, even though it's very vanilla, almost robotic, it works because of her background, because of what she had to deal with as a child, and then the career that she chose going into the FBI. Just everything about this movie works. Alicia Witt is fucking spectacular in this. I'm so glad to see her in horror again. I don't think we saw her in horror since that Gretel and Hansel movie where she played the witch. So I am very, very happy with Longlegs, and yeah, I can't say, and I can't put into words how much I fucking love this movie. I may watch it again right after we're done here. I loved it that much, and of course I ran out and got the 4K as soon as it was available, and I've already watched it like 2 or 3 times since it's come out, and I try to turn people onto it. And the funny thing is I know this movie's not for everyone. Like, I actually watched a couple of YouTube videos where people call this their most disappointing movie of the year because of how the marketing campaign made it look like something that would be ultra disturbing and dark, but they didn't see the movie that way when they watched it, whereas I'm the complete opposite. This is one of the most uncomfortable movies I watched in the last few years. So,
Oh,
yeah.
you know why, Venom? Because everybody goes into every movie thinking it's going to be a guy running around just murdering people.
Of course.
It's so old and tired that, like, everybody thinks every movie is supposed to be a slasher. Like, they're like, oh, evil Nicolas Cage, he should be running around just murdering people. Like, people, there are other subgenres within the horror genre.
I don't think I would have liked this movie even half as much if Nicolas Cage was actually a serial killer, actually actively killing these people himself. I don't know. Unless they really...
Well, he would have made it just like 1,000 other movies you've seen. That's the thing. It could have still been entertaining, but like it wouldn't.
Absolutely. It just probably wouldn't have made my top 10 by any stretch.
There's no way Oz Perkins would have made that.
So. Oh, no, not at all. Yeah. Oz Perkins, he's another Robert Eggers. Every fucking movie he's done is great. I may not say that they're all 10 out of 10s, because, a couple of his earlier movies were very slow burns, and, they're kind of an acquired taste, specifically... What is it? The Pretty Girl in the House, or whatever the fuck the name of that movie is. I love that movie, but it is a slow burn to every possible interpretation of what a slow burn is. That movie is even the ending is slow. So, but Oz Perkins is another director that I absolutely love. And again, he's turning into like a top 3 director to me. So yeah. I mean, I could talk about Longlegs for another hour and a half, so I'll shut up now and just say everyone's performance. But I mean, Blair Underwood, when was the last time we saw Blair Underwood? And he's fucking great in this movie. So, yeah, I absolutely adore this film. It has been my number 1 since the minute I walked out of the theater on July 12th when it opened, and nothing has come close to it since. So, yeah. Again, I get to keep my streak of knowing what my number 1 movie is as soon as I watch it, even if it's in January, because don't forget, my number 1 movie in 2020 was VFW, and that was a January release, and I saw that in theaters because I live in LA and I was lucky enough to see it in theaters. I know most cities in the country didn't get VFW in theaters, but I saw it in theaters. It was like the 3rd week of January, and I knew it was going to be my number 1 movie. So I'm very happy that I get to keep that streak going. So yeah.
How does the 4K look and sound? Like, is it really?
Oh my God, are you kidding? Well, I mean, look, the movie is shot to look like it's a 70s movie. So I mean, as far as the look of it goes, it's incredibly clear, but it's really more for the sound, because the score, the sound, I mean, the sound design of this movie is fucking stellar. And I know a lot of people are kind of sick of those kind of harsh screeching sound effects that a lot of horror movies give us, specifically A24 horror movies, but I'm still on board for it when it's done correctly, and Longlegs did everything correctly for me. So yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, my number 1 is Longlegs.
All right, yeah, can't go wrong there. Dawn, let's get your number 1 of the year. Or for Fresh Cuts movies, at least.
Yeah, my number 1, I fell in love with this one. I know that there's going to be a bit of contention, because I know it kind of came out at a time where there was others who claimed that there was a better version of this one. But this was the one that stuck with me the most. It was the one that came out first, and it was the one that I enjoyed the most. and that is Immaculate.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. The setup is fantastic. I love the slow reveal of the evil goings within the convent. Sydney Sweeney in a nun's outfit. Yeah, there's just so much to like about this one. And yeah, let's talk about that finale, because I'm pretty sure one of us was hard, and yeah.
Hard. I came twice.
Well, there you go.
Oh.
But yeah, it was just an absolutely just phenomenal way to go about this. Yeah, I really can't find much fault with it. I don't know where it would land if this came out in other years, but at least as far as I'm concerned, it's number one for overall, because again, my pool is only Fresh Cuts films. I don't know where this would land. This is probably top three. There are one or two other movies that came out not on Fresh Cuts that kind of are slotted in just a tick above this one. But yeah, it was just fantastic. I loved it. Just full on, full throttle, anti-religious, satanic fueled bloodshed. That's just the way I love it. So number one for me is Immaculate.
Nice. Yeah. I'm assuming the other one you're talking about is First Omen, being like the similar one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, First Omen was good too, but not nearly as good in my opinion.
I think the finale of Immaculate definitely puts it over the top out of the two.
What I'm just saying is that I'm noticing a lot more recently that people are giving First Omen more credit than Immaculate. At least in terms of the lists I've seen. Maybe you guys are reading and listening to different ones, but at least the ones I've seen and heard, the First Omen is the one that's getting ranked higher and more often than Immaculate.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing it too, actually. Because I at the end of the year, I'll watch any top 10 horror or just top 10 overall movie list on YouTube or podcast or whatever. And actually, you're right. I mean, we are the first ones that I've heard even mention Immaculate. No one has Immaculate in their top 10. If they do have one of those two movies, it's almost always The Omen. But,
Yeah.
Which I did enjoy. Don't get me wrong. I did still like, because I love the Omen franchise. Like, I'm an apologist for that franchise. Like, even the weaker later entries, I still really enjoy. But Immaculate just beat him to the punch and gave us just such, like, the ending of the First Omen is very fan servicey, because it's connecting it to the, one of the greatest horror films ever made in the original Omen. But with Immaculate, that ending, it's so finite. It's just there's no two ways of interpreting the ending of Immaculate. It is just gleeful, in my opinion. And coming from this Satanist, potentially one of my favorite endings of the year. Just so much fun. So yeah, love it.
All right. My number one shouldn't be a surprise because it hasn't been named yet.
It should be a surprise. I don't even know what your damn movie is.
Well, considering what my 2 through 9 and honorable mentions didn't mention this, like based on my reaction on Fresh Cuts, I don't expect everyone to remember though. Like it would be weird for me not to have ever brought it up this whole time. So my little spiel. In an era where I tend to favor a lot of like quote unquote elevated horror, I know some people don't like the term. I'm just using it because everyone knows what I mean when I say that. At the top of a lot of my lists in like the last decade, you're gonna find A24, Neon, or something similar, like those kind of like multi-layered, all this subtext. And I have no shame about it. I truly do love those movies, and I tend to like those the best in those years that they came out. So this year, when I was going through my list, I kind of noticed like what I have at the top is like kind of like the opposite, because I feel like the story in this is one of the most simple, straightforward stories of any movie on my list, any movie that I've seen this year. But sometimes, for me, if they just put like, if they put forward a creepy movie with a cool little story and an effective as hell scare or a couple scary things about it, I also feel like this movie, I don't think it necessarily takes place uh in like an older era, but it looks like, it almost feels like it could. They don't go out of their way to like say like, oh, this is an update of like Hammer movies. They don't, do anything over the top, but I feel like it's almost like a modern version of what some of those Hammer movies would be like. I think this movie is incredibly effective. You can almost call it understated in its approach. I remember specifically during our Fresh Cuts episode, Venom was a fan, but he thought the ending was too subtle, or it was like one or two steps away from landing the plane perfect. I disagreed with it at the time, just because I felt like it. I understood where he was coming from, because there was definitely the potential to take it that one step further based on what we did get. But I still feel like when I rewatch it, I still feel that I'm okay with what we get and how it ended. Um, and sometimes simple is okay as long as simple's done really well. So my number one movie, saw it in the theater, rewatched it on Shudder, it would be Oddity. When I saw this in the theater, I wasn't like, I figured it would end up on my list, but I wasn't sure like how high. But like as I was going through everything, and I was like looking at just pure like, when I check off the boxes of like what I want in a horror movie, this just checked all the boxes for me, and there wasn't really any flaws. I mean, I think having more people having seen it, like beyond just the three of us talking about it, I feel like the biggest criticism from people who find it like a lot less enjoyable than me is just, they feel it's very understated based on like what they had heard people talk about. And I understand in the modern era, when we get a lot of over the top stuff, we get just a lot of like eccentric characters, we get lots of craziness happening in movies. This isn't like that type of movie, and it just didn't hurt it for me. Like I just enjoyed the simplicity of it. It never felt like it tried to go outside the bounds of what it was trying to be. It felt like the same type of movie the entire running time, and it was just, to me, the complete package of what I want in like a simple, straightforward horror movie. And yes, that wooden, I don't know what the hell you would call a talisman or whatever it is. That thing.
You could call him a
creepy.
golem. I think it's acceptable.
A golem, yeah. And like it was weird because like the first time I watched it, like the whole time, it's like you're assuming that thing's gonna come into play, and then at a certain point, I was like, maybe it's not, and it's just supposed to be there and sit scary. But then when it finally becomes a bigger part of the movie, it's just very effective. And like I will say that like if there's one thing to detract from the movie, I'll say like the reveal of like what's going on. I wouldn't exactly say that was a hard like mystery to figure out. You kind of like get, because they're really, to me, laying the breadcrumbs of like who's behind the killing of the person. So if there's anything like I'll say, yeah, you're probably right about that, is that like it wasn't a super hard thing to discover. It's not, I don't even know if I would call it really a reveal, because they're kind of setting it up to be who it was. But other than that, I didn't find really any flaw in the movie, and I liked it and found it chilling the second time around. I do feel like after listening to Venom though, your spiel on Longlegs and me having it at 7, I'm like, shit, I need to rewatch it, because maybe it should be higher. Because
I think it should.
I didn't disagree with anything you said about Longlegs, and then now I'm just like, damn it, I wish I had time, or I would have had time to rewatch it.
That's kind of funny because you've got Oddity at number 1. I've got Oddity at number 7. I've got Longlegs at number 1. You've got Longlegs at number 7. So yeah, there's something weird going on there.
Interesting.
Not to say that either one of us is right or wrong. Obviously, these lists are subjective. These are our favorite movies of the year. If Oddity spoke to you more than Longlegs did on one or two watches, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I loved Oddity. I do wish that there was a little bit without. I mean, I hate to talk spoilers, but at this point, the movie's been out for like over 6 months, so it's not that much of a spoiler. But it's just the fact that the only on-screen kill is the one person that I don't want to die in the movie. It's almost like a sad horror movie to me. Yes, the guilty parties do get their comeuppance, but it's all off screen. We don't actually get to see it. And when I talked about that ending being a little bit low key, that's just me. That's my pettiness and my vindictiveness. I want to see the big bad of a movie get theirs. You know, I've talked about this for years now, how movies will set up just an absolutely shitty fucking character that we want to see get ripped limb from limb, and then they die off screen. And it's like, well, why the hell did you set that guy up to be such a scumbag if you're not even going to give me the satisfaction of watching them die? But I will agree with Mike that on rewatches, I had less of an issue with that ending. I'm almost at the point now where I kind of like it, where it just ends with that final shot of the bellboy standing there. It actually, the more I watch it, the more it works for me. So, but like I said, it's just my kind of petty nature where I want to see the big bad get theirs. But ultimately, Oddity is a fucking spectacular movie and a great choice at number one. No arguments from me.
Yeah, and I do appreciate too that it kind of feels like a natural progression for the director, because his first one, Caveat, I think we all enjoyed too, and then it's like you kind of see the next step, and now it's like I want to see what he's doing next, right? With like an even bigger budget.
So is the next movie will have the bunny and the golem in it, and that'll be the progression. Every time a new movie comes out, something from the last movie is in there. I love, because that's one of my favorite Easter eggs of the year is the bunny in Oddity. Like I was so happy when I saw that there. I knew going into it that it was the same director, but I really didn't think that they would do that kind of thing where this is in the same. I mean, you could make the argument that this is all one universe, that Oddity and Caveat and maybe whatever movies are coming up next from that director are all in the same universe. And I'm okay with that, honestly. Ultimately, I'm very okay with that. But Caveat, I absolutely, I think I remember being the highest one on Caveat. Like, I fucking loved it. I loved everything about it. Even that ending was great. Oddity is definitely a step up. Like, we see the filmmaking elements are improving, the camera work, score, sound design, all of it. Like, you know, Oddity is definitely a full step above Caveat as far as filmmaking goes. Obviously, the story might not work for everybody. But it obviously worked for Mike and I because, you know, we both fucking love that movie. So, yeah, no arguments.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if, like, some type of cursed object or item is, like, a reoccurring thing in his movies, or if it's just he just happened to have a particular story with them, like, to start out his film career. Because, like, I'm like, any more movies with cursed items, and watch out, the Warrens are going to show up and try to...
Maybe the next movie will be like a vampire movie, and the vampire will have like the golem and the bunny in his castle or something.
Either that, or we're gonna have to do like a bonus extended version of a Crystal Lake gift shop and say, hey, we got some new cursed items.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we could do it. We could start a cinematic cursed object podcast. That'd be good. Not to say that the golem is cursed in this movie necessarily, but I do like the idea.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's our top 10 lists with honorable mentions for 2024. Do we have any final words on the year? I mean, we kind of said what we had to say about it, but anything?
I mean, like I said earlier, despite the weak start, it ended up being a very good year. I thought it was definitely better than 2023 overall as a whole from beginning to end. And obviously with my number one this year being one of my favorites. I mean, Longlegs is probably now my number two movie of the decade. And it's still probably about 3 miles behind the sadness, because I'm sorry, but the sadness is the sheer definition of guilty pleasure. I don't care. I've had a lot of people call me sick and depraved for praising that movie as much as I have, but I don't give a shit. The sadness is fucking spectacular, and I know there's at least one person on this podcast that agrees with me. So
it's still my favorite film of the decade.
Yep.
Hey, it's the sadness is the first 4K I bought blindly, just based on what I had heard.
Nice.
And it did not disappoint. I do not regret it at all. I think it's one of the few movies that no matter how much I heard about it, it still lived up to like everything that was said.
That is true. I mean, that's part of the reason why we try to watch these movies as soon as they come out, so that like word of mouth and the overall fan hype doesn't affect me. I mean, it's the same reason I don't watch trailers. It's the same reason I don't watch preview videos or read blurps or reviews about these movies before I see them, because I just want to go in as absolutely blind as possible. And I'm going to continue that in 2025. And 2025's already started out better than 2023. I mean, The Damned is not a top 10 candidate necessarily, but I did enjoy it. The ending left me a little sour, but for the most part, I enjoyed the journey. So it looks like 25 is starting out well. And of course, we got the Wolfman next week. So, I have faith in Lee Winnell. Lee Winnell has done me well over the years, all the way back to the original Saw. So, fingers crossed that, we get another, Invisible Man type remake, because I love the Invisible Man. So, I try to curb my expectations as much as possible, but I am very excited for the Wolfman, especially because I didn't like the Benicio del Toro one, but that's a story for another show. So I'll leave that alone.
Which we'll probably talk about next week anyway.
Yep.
Cool. Yep. So that's going to wrap up 2024 and our top 10 show. And like as Venom mentioned, it looks like the Wolfman, because technically we have a weekend coming up before the Wolfman. There might be something from this year that drops on VOD, but I think unless something like drops and someone watches it and it's just like totally blows you away, I would say it's safe to say Wolfman is probably going to be our first official episode of 2025.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, when I say always on the top 10 shows is like, thanks everyone. It's been another year of ups and downs, obviously. We enjoy doing the show, but that doesn't always necessarily mean we enjoy the movie we're talking about. But that's kind of how the roll of the dice, especially since we're pretty committed to covering things that come out in the theater. It's really a roll of the dice sometimes, but it's comes with the gig, I guess, as they say. So yeah, thanks for sticking around for another year, and we're getting ready to start a whole nother one, 2025. Let's hope it can build on kind of like the rebound year. I would say let's hope it starts earlier, but as Venom said, it kind of did.
Yeah. Like I said, despite my issues with the ending of The Damned, it's still a solid movie. I would recommend it.
If it still has showtimes here, since there's nothing else, because Wolfman is not till the following weekend, I might go see it this week.
It's not a bad movie. I mean, it's a period piece, so at the very least, it's very well made, and it's somewhat historically accurate. It takes place during the American Civil War, I believe. Not that the Civil War has anything to do with the story. It's just that's the time period that it takes place in.
Okay. Yeah, and if anything, if I do end up going to see it, I can just mark it down for what we watched on the main show.
There you go.
Cool. Well, with that said, I think, what is today? Thursday. So about a week and a half, I would estimate, for our Wolfman episode, first official episode of 2025. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and get out of here and shut the door on 2024 horror. So let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
Nicolas Cage and David Dashmelian are the MVPs of 2024. Woo!
Peace.